Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Tonight's session is part 3 of Creative Capital's Coping with COVID free online series for artists and creatives. Creative Capital supports innovative and adventurous artists across the country through funding, counsel, and career development services. As part of our mission Sorry, I'm getting an echo. As part of our mission to support artists when needed most, we have created this series specifically designed to help artists deal with the effects of the outbreak. Our next workshop, Centering Wellness and Self-Care for Creatives with artist and healer Rhonda Wheatley, will be streamed here next Tuesday, April 21st at 4 p.m. Eastern. We also have an extensive list of artist resources on our website, creative-capital.org, as well as a list of festivals, exhibitions, and artist events that have moved online. And we have joined forces with several national arts grant makers to form Artist Relief Fund, an initiative that includes immediate, unrestricted emergency funding of $5,000 for individual artists of all disciplines and resources to help those in need due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Go to artistrelief.org to learn more and to apply. I'm now pleased to introduce you to Amy Bloustine. Amy is a certified life and career coach, time management coach, and trained recovery coach. She has worked with Creative Capital awardees, as well as individuals around the country from a variety of fields to help identify and overcome obstacles that are preventing each of us from becoming the best version of ourselves. We wanted to include this workshop in this series because we know that many of us are experiencing a warped sense of time, juggling unusual schedules, and struggling to find balance and carve out time for what we need to do and what we want to do during this pandemic. Amy will answer questions at the end of her talk, so please type them into the YouTube chat and we'll get them to her as soon as we receive them. So welcome, Amy, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see? Okay, thank you so much. This is such a great opportunity and I really enjoyed my time being able to work with Creative Capital. And I just want to start out by recognizing that we all have different family structures. We either live alone, we live with others, and we all are living in different types of spaces. So the purpose of today's session is really to share information with you that you may or may not fit into your version of what works for you, but hopefully this gives you a foundation and that you do figure out what is best for you and your family. So when we look at time management, it's going to be different for all of us. And it's not a one size fits all. And what works for me may not work for you and vice versa. I'm the type of personality, I'm very structured, very process oriented, very detail oriented. And so that version works for me. But if that's not the version that works for you, that's okay, because there's not necessarily a right or wrong. So given today's current situation with COVID-19, we're all making modifications and creating a version that works best for us and our families. And things are constantly changing. And we have to make changes on a regular basis. So this will happen until we're able to get back to what our lives were. And again, please create a version from this that works best for you. I'm going to share a lot of tips, tools, and resources, and hopefully you'll figure out something that is productive for you, efficient for you. The great thing about this is I've gotten the great opportunity to work with many of the artists and about time management. And what's fascinating for me and what I've learned is that it's amazing to me everything that you all do, everything from the jobs that you do, the grants that you're seeking, the teaching, your personal art practice. And I've learned a tremendous amount of how to apply time management tools to what you all are doing. So hopefully today you'll walk away with some new tools and tips. So let's get started. Oops. So here we go. So during the session today, you are going to learn strategies to get organized, new tips and skills to better manage your time personally and professionally, better ways to create and manage your to-do list, strategies to allocate your time more efficiently and effectively, ways to create a productive and positive work environment, and skills to set yourself up to successfully work from home. This is new for all of us. So for a lot of you, you may not have worked in your home environment, but hopefully today we'll give you some more tips on how to do that. So I thought these were just some fun facts, fun tips about the cost of disorganization, which when I started doing time management became really amazing to me, the amount of time that we spend just simply looking for things. And one thing that fascinated me is the one about it takes 23 minutes to recover from one interruption. So that means if somebody walks up to you and says, "Do you have a minute?" and they're spending 25 minutes with you, just explaining that one thing that was supposed to take a minute, it's going to take you 23 minutes after that to recover from that interruption. And so when you think about how many times you get interrupted in a day, you think about how much time you're really losing. The other one that I thought was really fascinating was that the average person will waste 1 year of their lives looking for lost or misplaced items. So if you're sitting there and you're looking around your home, wherever you are, and you think about things that are misplaced, think about how much time it takes you to find that. So what is time management? This again is going to look different for everybody, but basically this is the analysis of how working hours are spent and how the prioritization of tasks in order to maximize personal efficiencies. So that means, how do you structure your day? How are you spending your time? How do you allocate your time? And not just personally, but professionally. And so hopefully today we'll get to some ways for you to manage that better. The other thing that I think is really important when it comes to time management is, do you think about how your time management impacts others? When I work with people, either going into an organization or working with individuals, and if there's somebody that is constantly late to a meeting, when I ask the question, do you think about how your time impacts others when you're late to a meeting? And a lot of times people don't realize that and don't think about it. So if you haven't thought about this before, maybe take the time to think about it now, that if you're late delivering something, if you're late to a meeting, if you're late to meeting friends, what does that mean? How does it impact others? And this is just something to start thinking about. So why are you here today? And I think this is a really important question to look at. Could be, how do you manage your time? How do you allocate all the hours in the day? Is your time management practice working? Do you have a time management practice? And what has it been like working from home? Or working remotely. That's a big thing that's on people's minds at the moment. So as we look at this, time management can be done in so many different ways. And some people are more technological than others. For me, I'm very old school. I like to write out lists. I like to highlight things when I'm done. For me, that's just a sense of accomplishment. People do Post-it notes. People may use apps that are on their phone. Some people are old school that have a calendar and handwrite things. You have to find the version that works for you. And again, it's not a one size fits all. I want this to be something for you all that's user friendly, something that is easier for you to do. If you're spending more time trying to figure out how to manage your time rather than getting in and doing it, then that's where we really need to take a moment and look at what's happening. You guys are so busy and you have so much going on. So I don't know what happened here. So hopefully with this, you'll start thinking about what's going to work best for you. So here are some, I'm not going to read through all of these. You guys have access to this, but some time management myths. And I think it's really interesting because when you think about how you're working, there are some people that work up to a deadline. And for them, they feel like they're much more productive that way, that they can get it done better, that it's a better version. So here's just a couple, and I'm just going to read a few, that the harder you work, the more productive you are, or the longer you work, the more productive you are. If you're efficient, you're effective. The best way to get the job done is to do it yourself. I know that many of you all, and just my experience from getting to work with several artists, is that you guys work in teams and you're relying on each other. And that's a great opportunity for you to figure out how to work best for yourself, but also within your teams. The next part of this is time thieves. And wait a second, let me go back. Sorry about that. Are time thieves. And what this means are, what are the most common time wasters? And I think this is really important, especially given how we're working at home now. And if you're working on, if you live alone, it may be a little bit different. But if you're working in an environment now where you have a family and you are trying to manage working from home as well as distant learning for your kids, whatever it may be, there's going to be a lot of interruptions and different things like that. So here are some of the most common ones: interruptions, the telephone, email, humans, trying to multitask or overcommitting, not planning, not having priorities or goals. And then procrastination is a really big one. The other one is digital distractions. And we're going to go through more of these to help you. So let's get to some of these. Let's start getting organized here. So let's talk about some interruptions and some distractions. So there's a difference between interruptions and distractions. So the interruptions are what's unexpected, unexpected external visitors. If somebody rings your bell, I know it's a little bit different right now since we're all social distancing, but if somebody shows up, somebody comes to you, a supervisor, colleague, whatever, and they say to you, I just need that moment. Family, ringing phones, emergencies, email notifications. Think about how many times you're getting notifications on your phone, either from email or right now, news headlines. If there's an equipment malfunction, something in the environment that's affecting you. So these are just some of the examples of interruptions. The next ones are, what are the distractions? Think about now, how many times a day are you checking your phone? How many times are you checking, if there's social media, and that's part of it, worrying. And we're all doing a lot of worrying right now. And a lot of people are very, very anxious. So we don't necessarily have the capacity to really be in that place, be very present. So these are a lot of distractions. We may not be feeling motivated or productive, especially given everything that's going on. Reading things that don't pertain to what you're working on. A big one is surfing the internet. If you briefly go on there to find something, how very easily can you go down a rabbit hole just looking for other things? And right now we are looking for some distractions. We're in a place right now where there's a lot of information overload. I know for me that I had to modify my news intake, for example, because it just gets to be too much. And these are distractions. I know for me, when I wake up in the morning, I do a little bit of news intake, and then maybe later on during the day, early evening maybe, but that's it, because we know it's changing so much throughout the day. So before we get to that though, something that I want to encourage you to do is really to make a list and really think about, what are your interruptions and what are your distractions? Because I think if you can identify what those are, you can start to address it. And, right now, the distractions at home that we're experiencing, it's quite different than anything we've ever had. And right now, it may be hard to take those distractions out of what is going on, but just be mindful of them, because we are going to get past this and we will move through this. So being aware of what's going on now and then being able to apply some things later could be very helpful. So the next part of this is how to use your time effectively and organize yourself. So again, everybody works differently and has a different type of workspace, but if you can, possibly avoid having a cluttered workspace, because when that happens, it's hard to focus on what needs to get done. Consolidate similar tasks, and these are just some examples. Tackle the tough jobs first. And what I mean by that is, everybody has a certain time during the day when they're most productive. Identify your most productive time during the day and tackle those toughest jobs. Maybe it's something about writing or your creative time, whatever it may be. Figure out what that time is for you and really focus on doing those tougher tasks there. Delegate and develop others. If you're working with teams, how do you delegate? Learn to use idle time. And here's what I mean by that. And I think this is really important. And it took me a while to learn this. We're all incredibly busy. And right now we're on maybe a lot of Zoom calls, staying connected with people. When you have that idle time, maybe 30, 40 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, whatever it may be, identify what you could do in that time. And it may be that it's a short break, getting up and taking a walk, whatever it may be. But think about if there's something that you can do in that idle time. What's between the next thing that you have to do? Getting control of your paper flow. I know for a lot of people, that's a hard one. We have so many things that we're working off of. So if you can kind of create a better control of that, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but that's a big helper with this one. Get started immediately on important tasks. And again, that goes back to figuring out what the tasks are that are most difficult to do, but start those first and start those as soon as you can. Here's one, and I say this ironically as we're in the moment of having so many meetings, having so many things virtually right now, is possibly reducing meeting time. And maybe that will come after this. I know for me, I've had a tremendous influx of meetings. And it can be overwhelming and it can be exhausting. So at some point when you can, if you can reduce that meeting time would be great. Take time to plan. And we're going to get into that because I think that's going to be really important. The other one, which took me actually a long time to learn personally, was learn how to say no. How do you set those boundaries for you? I know for many of you guys that I've worked with that it's constantly seeking new grants or it's finding what that next project is, but it's figuring out too sometimes, can you say no to something in order to manage what you currently have going on? And then it's kind of putting all of this together and thinking about, again, what is the version that's going to work best for you? So I do want to get into the to-do list. And again, this is something that is different for everybody. Let me give you just a little bit of an example of how I structure mine. But again, this is just an example. And I want you to walk away with something that maybe tidbits of how to do it for yourself and create a version. For me, on Sundays, I work on my to-do list and I prep for my week. And what I mean by that is I identify everything that I have to do for the week, all my tasks. And when I do that, I then take it and I put it on a calendar and I calendar everything. And then the reason I do that is because for me, I just want to get in on Mondays and start my week. I want to get in and do my work. Now, my to-do list is going to change throughout the week. And I know for many of you guys, you have a very fluid calendar like I do, and things will change and your to-do list will grow. But if I have something that I'm working off of, a foundation of this, this is much better for me. And that way, the other part that's important about this is if I know what to expect and I know how my week is structured, then I can manage any of those interruptions that might come in and know when I can change my calendar around. But if I know what I'm looking at going into it, I can visually prepare for it. And here's just a couple things to think about with the to-do list is change expectations that your list is going to grow. They don't go away. But your goal with this list is to get things off of that list. Be thorough, write initially when you start this is write everything down, kind of do a brain dump, put everything down on a list. And then the other thing that's really important is, and I know for a lot of people, you guys have multiple lists. Only work from one list. Have one list for your professional stuff, and then maybe one list for a personal, and keep those separate, but have one list. A lot of clients I talk to have multiple notebooks that they have, and it gets too confusing. So if you can consolidate that down to one, that's a great thing. The other part of this is being really specific, and we're going to talk about this in a second, but if you were incredibly specific with your tasks, you know exactly what to do, it's going to take the guesswork out of it. And then assigning a date with each task. And we're going to talk about this in just a second. But part of it too is that how many of you guys, and I know we can't see this, but how many of you get in bed at night and you think about, God, what do I need to do tomorrow? And you go through this list and it keeps you up and you don't get to sleep. If you know what your next day looks like already, because you've already prepared for it, that guesswork goes away and you could just get into doing the work. So here's a great way to start structuring your to-do list is think about your buckets. Think about how to break up the work that you do. So a couple of the clients that I've worked with through Creative Capital, some of the buckets that have included grants. Another one could be teaching. Another one could be your own personal art practice. It could be different projects that you're working on. You also, for many of you all, there's an administrative side to it. So think about how to break up each thing that you're doing into buckets. That way you're really able to visualize everything that's going on. And the other part of it too is that when you sit down and you really break out everything you're doing, it's looking at how realistic is this for you to do? How can you keep up with this? And how are you allocating your time for all of this? And I know some things are seasonal for you all, so things will come up later on. Excuse me. So just think about, I encourage you to break things up into buckets. I have all my buckets. I use a Excel spreadsheet. I'm kind of old school, and I break up my buckets, and I have all my tasks under there for each of the things that I'm working on. That way I know what tasks are to come. And, you also, oops, sorry about this, guys. Sorry that this keeps flipping around. The other thing too is think about what your personal ones are. You have your professional buckets, but you also have your life buckets. You can't forget about what you're doing for yourself. I keep mine very different and separated. For me, it just helps me visualize. It helps me allocate my time better. So here's where I want to get into when you were talking about different tasks. And what I mean by that is, so here's the steps we have so far. You've taken a first step of just doing your brain dump of all of your to-do lists, right? And then you're identifying your buckets, and you're putting each of your to-dos into your buckets. When you're writing out your tasks, this is what I want you to think about. If you can be the S part of these are SMART goals, or what we call SMART actions. If you can be really specific with your tasks, it's going to help you. And again, takes out the guesswork. So for example, if I wrote down a list to say I'm going to Duane Reade, and if I do not write down what I need, inevitably I'm going to forget something. It just always happens. So if I'm really specific with that way I complete that list. The other part of it is it could be measurable, the ability to track your progress. For you, some of y'all, that's more important. The A part of this is achievable, setting challenging yet achievable goals. I know for me, and there's always inevitably something that's on my list that just sits there. And what I've learned that if I have not done it and within a certain period of time, it goes off my list. I'm not going to get to it, or I'm not going to do it. The R part of it, again, goes back to this. How relevant is this? How relevant is it to everything that you need to achieve? And this is the part, so the S part I think is really significant, being really specific and specific, succinct and specific with your tasks. But here's the other part of this, time. I always put a date around what my task is. And the reason I do that is I then take everything and I put it on my calendar. And if I have specific dates around it, I know when I need to achieve it. And kind of a rule of thumb when you're thinking about this is you don't want to have too much on your list for a day because it's not achievable, maybe. So think about what are 2 or 3 things that you need to work on. Is it something that you're working on a play, that you're working on a production of something? Is it something that you need to do for a grant? Identify 2 to 3 things at the most. If you get more things done, that's great, but think about how to prioritize it. What is it that you need to get done? The other thing that I want to talk about before we get into routines is once you've done this, and I wish I could see you all and ask the question of how many of you guys actually use a calendar, either on your phone, on your computer. I work from my calendar on my phone and I work from my calendar on my computer, and I'm always checking it. And one of the things that's really important with this is that the reason that's important is that you want to take these tasks after you've done your to-do list. You want to put them on your calendar. You all have a lot of moving pieces with the work that you do, and a lot of it is spread out over a period of time. But if you're able to take that and put it on your calendar, not just put it on your calendar, but chunk your time on your calendar for when you need to work on it. I know for me, something that I kind of, I need a lot of brain power to do is working on a book. I have to chunk that time on my calendar. I have to identify that time on my calendar and make sure I get it done. And we have a lot going on, and you're also doing more right now at home, especially if you have families that you're at home with, where you have more tasks involved. So being able to put stuff on a calendar and schedule it is really, really important. And the other part with a calendar is, and again, this is going to be different for everybody, and I want you to find a version that works for you. I use an iCalendar. And for me, I color code it. So based on those buckets that we were talking about, I color code based on that. And the reason that helps me is when I look at my calendar, I then can visualize and know, okay, this is what I'm going to be working on for today. This is how I create the space mentally to work on it. And I found that that's helped me so much, because before it would just kind of be one color and it was just all there. When I color code, I know how to create that space. So I highly recommend if you can do that. The other thing too is make sure, your calendars are syncing. If you're using one from, your phone versus one on your computer. I have a Samsung phone and I have a MacBook Pro. I have to sync those every day because they don't, or I have to update them every day because they don't sync. And so make sure you're using something where you're updating this regularly. Another good tool with this is Google Calendars too, if that's a means for you all. Whatever you can use that's really going to add value to your calendar, track your time. So it's really important. The other part that's really good about this is when you're doing these things on your calendar, if you go back at the end of the week and maybe reflect on what you've done for the week, you can see your allocation of time. You can also see what wasn't realistic to get to, and then look at it and figure out, why am I not able to get to this? So use the calendar not only to schedule your time, schedule your tasks, meetings, whatever it may be, but also use it as a tool for reflection and to really go back and look. Because I do that at the end of the week, to really look at, all right, this is what I achieved. Was this really realistic for the week? Was I able to get to everything? Was it too much in a week? And for me, that's become incredibly helpful. And it's also kind of a booster too. And it's kind of a positive thing to be able to go back and look at, okay, you know what? I was able to get a lot done this week. This was a really good week. Oops, sorry about that. So here's where we want to get into the working remotely, because our lives have changed significantly. I know for me, and I know I'm just giving examples of what I've been doing, but for me, my work life hasn't changed so much because I work from home. And so my work week, my Monday through Friday, is somewhat the same. Yes, there's been modifications, but for the most part, I've had that structure and that stability. So here are just some examples. And again, you have to take from this what works best for you. Dividing up your workspace into neighborhoods or zones, especially if you're sharing the space with more than one person. I could tell you with a lot of clients that I'm working with, this has been a big issue. We all live in different environments. I live in New York City, so thank goodness it's just me, one bedroom, living room, that type of thing. But break up those zones, especially if you've got kids, and figuring out who's got what space. Everybody gets to own their space. And that way there's not confusion with it, and you can build structure around the space that you identify for yourself. Organize a workstation, someplace where you're able to really make it your own, something that's comfortable, where you can be productive. If we're working in a space and it's hard to find things, or it's just the lighting's not good, whatever it may be, it's going to be really hard to be productive. The other part of this, if this is doable, is to find a desk that allows you to sit up properly, with proper structure. I heard the other day a client of mine, she was frustrated because she's been working at the kitchen table just because of how she and her family split up their zones. And she said that her back's been bothering her so much because it's not a conducive space for her. So we worked on ways of changing that. The other part to this is, finding a chair that works for you. That's important. Create an environment where you feel inspired, creative, motivated, and productive. I know that's really important for you all because you're very creative people. So thinking about, what is the space? Some of you may have worked in studios, wherever it may be, and now you're only able to work in one space now. How do you create that environment for yourself? The next part of this is, again, removing the distractions and the interruptions. And we talked about some of those, and there may be some new ones that are happening. So identify those. If you can remove them, great. If it's not realistic to do that, okay, we understand that. Identify when you're going to start your day and when you're going to end your day. Here's something that's new. If you are working in an environment, if it's just you, it's different. If you are working now in an environment where there's more people in the space, creating that structure of when you're going to start your day and when you're going to end it, there's boundaries that you can set. And that's kind of a great thing for everybody to do. And that way you guys figure out how to work among each other. The next part of this, more about working remotely, that again, going back to create the to-do list, scheduling things on your calendar. At the end of the day, and this is going to sound funny, but I'm going to describe this, it's putting your day away. So I have something that I do that helps me when I put my day away, and my day ends various different times during the day, or sometimes earlier than later. What I do for me, and again, you have to come up with a version that's going to work for you, is for me, I go through, the first thing I do is I try to clear out as many emails as I can. And that's really important for me. The next part of this is to clean off my desk, get organized for the day. Go through, look at my calendar. What do I have for the next day? Seeing if there's any folders that I have for clients, whatever it may be. I clean off my desk, whatever that looks like for you. And the last thing, and this is kind of ritualistic for me, is to throw my trash away. And for me, that kind of represents, okay, my day is over. So I'm able to walk away from my workspace knowing, all right, this is what I've gotten done for the day. This is what I have for tomorrow. And then ending my day by throwing my trash away. And I know it sounds ritualistic, but for me, it works. And, figure out a way to do this for you, because the other thing too is that I can get in bed at night and not think about what I have to do for the next day. I can look at it as more of a gratitude and think about what were the positives of the day. The other part with working remotely too is staying connected with friends and family. I know we're all trying to stay connected, either virtually, text, phone calls, whatever it may be. This is really important. You also, I know for me, sometimes get into this mode of I work too much. And so for me, this is a great reminder of I need to stay connected with people. If it's necessary, work in 45-minute chunks, take breaks with this. If you need to set an alarm on in some way, do that, take those breaks, and that movement part of it is going to be really, really important. We can get very sedentary when we're working at home. So if you can create movement, create a way of, moving around your apartment, or if possible, getting out. For me, I wear a Fitbit. So at 10 of the hour, if I've not got my steps in, it's going to vibrate and it's going to remind me I need to move. This is another one that I thought was interesting, was turn on airplane mode for your technology until lunch, if that's possible. Maybe this is a way to help you get in your zone. The last part of this, which I think is really important, is be kind to yourself. This self-care is really important, and you've got to listen to your body. If you're tired, then take a break. If you're not feeling great, take a break. If you're not feeling motivated, listen to what your body is saying and do something for it. So with these, again, everybody's time management is going to be different. And I'm old school, but here are some different apps that you can use. Technology may be your friend and you may work better with that. A lot of great ones that are out there. And find something that's going to work and be conducive for you. That's the whole thing with this, is figuring out what is the version that works for you. How do you create a system that's working for you? And you may have to make modifications. It may be something where you are trying something for a couple of weeks. It's known that it takes a good 30, sometimes 60 days to create a new habit. That's what you're doing with this, is creating habits. So figure out what your tools are, figure out, what's going to be the best way to allocate your time, to manage your time, and make modifications along the way. It's a learning process. And then here are the next steps with this. So I've given you a lot of information in a short amount of time and a lot of tips and tools. And again, it's absorbing it. So I want you to walk away with, okay, what do I do next with this? It is, one, defining your time management tools, just what we talked about, your calendar, your apps, how your planner is, whatever will work best for you. Create your buckets that we talked about. Your work buckets, your life buckets, really important to have this, because it's going to help manage your to-do list. Then write out your to-do list and do a full brain dump of this. And then once you've done that, get really specific with your tasks and put them underneath those buckets. Assign a date to each of your tasks. I always have a date, and that's really important because I know when things are going to need to be done. And the other thing that's good about this is if I have a date around it and at the end of the day I didn't get to it, I can figure out on my calendar when I can. Say no when necessary. There are other options. I get approached from a lot of people to do different things that I just don't have the bandwidth to do. But instead of just doing a flat no, I kind of like to do something where we can figure out what is another option. Can we do this at another time? Or please consider me for something else. Be realistic with your time and set boundaries. Boundaries are going to be really important. Determine when you're going to prep for the week. Figure out, again, what works for you. Some people do it on Friday. Some people will do it Monday mornings. Whatever is going to be best for you. Again, put your day away. Next one, managing your interruptions, creating a good workspace, and then building a time management practice that takes time and, that you could create habits around. And again, try something, see if it works. If it doesn't, make a modification. This is all a buildup. And maybe this is all overwhelming to try and do all of this at once. Pick a couple things, one or two things that you want to try, see how it works, and then maybe change it up or add to it. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. And I think there are some questions in here. One of the questions was, could you speak more about internal motivation? I think that's going to be different for everybody. And is it possible for this person to maybe come off mute and talk a little bit more about this so I can answer this better? Is that possible? Maybe not. Okay. So internal motivation, it's thinking about what motivates you, what inspires you each day. For me, having the structure, different projects, that's my internal motivation. And knowing what I get to do the next day, that keeps me highly motivated. So I hope that answered the question. If not, please, let us know and I could talk more about it. What if you're normally good at these strategies, but can't pull it together right now? This is great. Great question. Take it in small bits. I think that's maybe the biggest thing to walk away with this is, how do you break this down in small pieces? Don't try to do everything at once. What we're learning is, even though we're working remotely and we're working from home or wherever that may be for you, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have more time. What it means is that you may have more tasks that you need to do. That if you are working at home and you've got kids, family, or whatever, there's more things that are going on. So take a break, be kind to yourself, and do maybe one or two things in a day. It could be that for you, it's just getting up and getting dressed for the day. And that's something that I forgot to mention earlier is I've heard from a lot of friends, a lot of clients and stuff like that, that they're staying in their pajamas all day. I recommend get up and get dressed every day. You're going to feel better. The other thing too is try and keep these routines as normal as possible and create a routine. That's going to be really important for you. Think about what you were doing on a regular basis and how to adopt that now. But again, right now, if you can't pull it all together, be kind to yourself and take it in a small bit. The next one is, what do you recommend for getting back to normal functionality in normal times? Feel paralyzed in many days. It's interesting because, and I talk to clients, peers, friends about this all the time. We're in such an unknown time that it's really hard to figure out what's going to come next. And I think what I can say about this is take it day by day and figure out what's going to work best for you in the moment. I can't control the news. I can't control anything else that's really outside of my apartment at the moment. I can only control what my structure is here. I like structure. So for me, it is, what do I need to do today? For some people, it's just taking it minute by minute or maybe hour by hour. So figure out how to stay in the moment of it, because we just don't know what this is going to look like. And to try to plan when we don't have information is really hard to do. So what can you do in the moment to get through the day? The next one is, it's hard for artists to give have a start and end time for their work. I'm hoping she'll speak more to problems that artists have, like how to be a slave to the moment inspiration hits. No, they are watching through YouTube. They're not. Oh, okay. So you're right. What I've learned from working with many of the artists is you guys have moments when you are in your zone in that creative space. Figure out how to adopt that and adapt it to what your current situation is. It's going to be different for everybody. Still stay inspired, still stay creative, figure out what's going to work for you. And I hope that answers that question, because it may not be realistic necessarily to have a start or an end time. For you, it can be just ongoing, but stay with what you know in that. The next one was, how about time management for people who are being laid off, who were laid off? This is a great question, and I do a lot of career coaching. If you have been laid off, there's a couple parts to it. Is one, the first thing is you kind of got to go through this recovery part of being in the moment of what's happened to you. It's very traumatic. And then when you are ready, that career part, that job search, it is happening. People are getting hired. And that's the good news with this. Yes, a tremendous amount of people are being laid off. There are a lot of industries that are hiring. And what I'm sharing with clients and with a coaching group that I do about career development is every day do something for your job search. Networking is really important right now. People want that connection. Take this time to figure out who you are, what you want to do. Identifying your targets, meaning what's the industry that you want to look at? What are the roles that you're interested in? Continue with this process, continue to apply for jobs, continue to talk with people. But the flip side of this is manage your expectations, meaning the response time might be a little bit longer, especially when you're applying for a job. We know that all interviews are taking place virtually right now. And the time it takes for a company to get back to you, just manage the expectation around that. Keep it going and hope that you're going to hear back from them. And, every day do something, be it your resume, your LinkedIn profile, a 2-minute pitch, figuring out what your brand is, continue with what that looks like. What's the next one? Do you put your to-do list into the calendar or keep this separate? Is the calendar the place for the deadlines or to write the whole task? So what I do with my to-do list is once I write it out, I've got an Excel spreadsheet that I use a template every week, and I just change up what's in there. And underneath each bucket, I put my tasks and I put a date around it. I then take those to-dos and I do put them on my calendar. That way I know when it needs to be completed, number one, but when I'm going to do it during the day. And sometimes it's one of those things that I'm so used to doing this that this is just second nature to me. But I use the iCalendar. And if you all are familiar with it, in the top part of the iCalendar is kind of this open space that I put in all of my tasks for the day. And then I put in different meetings and things that are scheduled, clients and stuff like that in the base of the calendar where it's scheduled for time. But I always put my tasks in my calendar, and that just helps me keep structure with it. It helps me know how to allocate my time and what needs to get done. Let's see, where is the next one? Can you say more about time management apps? So what's great about time management apps are you can do them for individual tasks. They create them for project-based. Asana is a really great one. The other couple that are on there, Trello or Basecamp. It depends on how you're working, if you're working individually on tasks or if you're working with groups, a team. Find one of those where you're all communicating together and use that. If you're somebody that technology works great for you and you want to, manage your time that way, by all means, please do that. For me, the least I can be on my phone or on my computer, the happier I am. So the next one is, will you explain how you use your Excel spreadsheet to organize your work? Could you please talk a bit about coping with fear and anxiety? I think those are two separate ones. So yeah, I'm more than happy to. So in my Excel spreadsheet, I have, and I'm happy to share this with the folks at Creative Capital, some of my tools, if they want to share it with you. On my Excel spreadsheet, I have different columns. The first column is going to be my tasks. And in that column, I put my buckets. So for example, the first one could be my clients, and I list out my clients for the week. The next column is the date that's supposed to happen, the due date. And so I put in, for example, the date that I'm seeing those clients. When I see a client, I follow up with action items and I send them a recap email. So what I do is that when I send that, I have the date that I send it. So for example, if I see a client today, I send their action items. I have 4/14, the date it was completed. So I have a due date column, I have a date completed column, and then I have a notes column next to it. So essentially it's 4 columns that you're going to see: the task, the due date, the date of completion, and then notes. And then I have this broken up into buckets. And that's how I am able to structure my week and even my month. I go week by week. And so all of my tasks that are on there are for a week. Hopefully that answered your question. Can you please talk a bit about coping with fear and anxiety? This is such a real moment for us, and we're all feeling with this. And I think the self-care piece is really important for this, figuring out, for me, it's day by day. And when I'm having that fear, when I'm having anxiety about something, I'm worried about my business. I'll be honest, coaching is something that, people are watching their finances. So the number of clients that I have on a regular week has been cut. And so I worry about that. But I will tell you, the best way to deal with it is, how do you cope through different situations? You have coping tools that you use. Apply those. The other thing that I do is I talk to people. I've got a great support system. Figure out who your support system is. The other thing is taking care of my body when I'm tired, having movement, eating well. That helps me. Again, the other part is reduce your news intake. There's a lot of people who are news junkies that need the information. That's where a lot of the fear and anxiety, I think, is coming from. And also the fear and anxiety of the unknown. For me, it is day by day. I will tell you, and I don't know how it is in other places, living in New York City, I can guarantee at 7 o'clock every night when I open up my window, I can end my day because everybody is cheering and clapping, hitting pots and pans, cheering for the doctors, the nurses, the first responders. And for me, that's kind of a sense of relief that we're all together in this. So that's a great thing for me. I'm also reading stuff that doesn't pertain to work. I'm doing a lot of binge watching, cooking. So whatever you do that you can ease your mind with, continue to do those things, but really be mindful of how you're feeling. So the next one, if you know you're more productive in the evening, but it's hard to wind down, how do you structure the day when working from home? Now there's none of the structured situation time after work. So what's interesting with that is, again, everybody has, their different times of the day when they're structured. How to wind down. If it is possible, and again, these are just recommendations. If you know that you're more productive in the evening and you need to wind down in order to go to bed, think about what is that, and this is going to sound funny when I say, what is your bedtime routine? What is your nighttime routine? If it is possible for you, at least an hour before you go to bed to wind down. And what I mean by that is create the right atmosphere, turn lights down a little bit, get into pajamas, turn off technology if you can. If you have the television on, that's fine. Get off your computer. That's the biggest thing. We're so glued to our computers right now and technology because that's how we're staying connected. We also need a break from it. So figure out for you when you can wind down. Maybe a suggestion with this could be, and again, take this for what it is. Maybe try, if you're having a hard time winding down, try an hour earlier to end your day. Maybe put an alarm on your phone, and you're going to end, if you normally end your day at 8:30 or 9:30, maybe try an hour earlier. Put an alarm on your phone that means, all right, I'm going to shut my day down. I'm going to put my day away. Let's see, what's the next one? Can you please talk more about the myth of last minute pressure gets the job done better? I suffer from that sometimes. We've all been in that place. And I think it comes from this, that when for a lot of us, we've gotten into this habit of just doing it the last minute. And for a lot of us, it works. We're able to get things done. And if there hasn't been a consequence to this practice, and I mean by waiting till the last minute, we're going to continue to do it. But the other thing to think about is, how is it affecting other people around you? If there is something that you're collaborating on a project, and not everybody works that way. You know, some people need to plan out differently. So if you do this, maybe take some of the techniques we've talked about today and plan out your tasks better, because I can guarantee when you start doing this and you're finishing your projects not at the very last minute, that you're going to see you may be able to even get more things done and allocate your time better. But think about, one, how it's impacting you. Have there been consequences to it? You know, maybe you didn't do it the best version of what you wanted it to be. Or there was, maybe you didn't get it in on time, whatever it could be. Think about that. Think about how it's impacting others. Think about what's one modification you can make in that to help you create a better habit. Don't try to do it all at once, because that may not be realistic for you. Think about what's one modification you can make in the moment. Let's see, what's another one? Can you talk more about the color codes for work and personal calendars? Could you share one of your Excel sheets as an example? Yeah, happy to do that. I can share with you my to-do list, actually. We have a few minutes to do that. The color coding, let me give you an example, and I can also show you my calendar too. Let me pull this up really quickly for you guys, because we still have a moment. So here's this, but let me go back to sharing my screen. Okay, so this is, I keep it very simple, you all, and that's, for me, that works the best. It's not complicated. I've been doing this for a long time with this. Took me different versions to get to. So for here, you can see first part of it. This is the week I'm working off of. Okay, this is the template I work off of every week. Here are my buckets: clients, if there's potential clients, my invoicing that I have. I'm doing a business development series, my website, the book I'm writing. I am president of a chapter, an organization. So these are all my tasks for that. Another group that I do coaching with, and then I have a miscellaneous list. And what I do at the beginning of every week is I go through and I write out all of my tasks. For my clients, it's a little bit easier because it's just the person's name. It's the date that I'm seeing them, and then completion date. Now, you're seeing where this looks empty. I have this list that is paper clipped to a folder that says in progress, and I actually handwrite with a red pen when it's completed. And for me, that just helps me see what I've completed in the week. So this is just what I work off of, but this is my to-do list. And this is literally what I use every week. And I keep it pretty much so to a week. Sometimes there's stuff on there that goes a little bit farther. Sometimes, and you'll see in here that here's 3 tasks here just for the 12th, but I keep the dates. You know, I always have a date. You could see there's a date here for everything. So let me close this, and then I'm going to share with you my calendar. So here is an example of my calendar, that the way I color code. So for me, clients are in blue. Anything work related that's not part of my buckets is one color. This is for my organization I'm involved with. This is another color. My personal stuff is in red. And then, so these are the various colors I have. What I do is like this. I put in different tasks that I have for the day. When I complete them, I delete them. For example, Creative Capital webinar today, I can go through and I can delete that. It's done. If there's something that I didn't get done, I'm going to move it over to my calendar, someplace else. Okay, so this is how I manage it. This is iCalendar. And so you can see over here my key of everything that I have color coded. This is what I go by. That way I can look at this and know what it looks like. The other thing too, just to keep in mind, mine is connected to Google Doc, or not Google, Google Calendar. So when something goes through Google, it just shows up in one color. That's why I have it color coded up top. Hope that makes sense for how to explain that. Let's see, where else? I've shared my calendar, I've shared my Excel. When making art writing, at times I find a flow and I don't want to interrupt myself, but I also don't want to neglect other to-dos. Any recommendations on how to budget time around creating work? You know, I've heard this for various times from working with different artists, and I want to have the right answer for this. But I want to be mindful of this too, is yes, it's important to stay in that flow, but there may be times that you have things that are of priority and you have to take care of, and you're going to have to get to them. So I guess I wish I could turn it back and ask the question for you, to budget your time with this. Maybe if you are able to chunk, creative time and add it, pad it with a little bit more time maybe, and then know that, you may have to end it a little bit early. I think it's just one of those things, you're going to have to prioritize your tasks and figure out, part of it too is, how do you get back into your flow? Are you able to stop and come back in? So I wish I knew how to have better recommendations on this, but maybe it's about how you chunk your time on your calendar, that if you know you're going to work on your own art practice, chunk a period of time. Maybe part of it is, if it's possible, is chunk that you have a certain day for it. You have to figure out what's going to be most realistic for your time. So I hope that answered that question. So I think that's all the questions.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Those were really, really great questions. I think a good balance of just thinking about care and more emotional aspects of scheduling, but then also some really practical tips. I love seeing your calendar. That was really great.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you all for spending your evening with us. Thank you, Elaine, so much for that wonderful workshop and all of your time with the Q&As. We hope that you join us next week. The wellness session that we're having next Tuesday will, I think, elaborate a lot more on some of the questions that came up, and it'll be another way for you to sort of think about this from a more holistic standpoint. This recording and all of our recordings from the series are recorded onto our YouTube channel and are also being featured on our website right now. So if you didn't manage to catch all of this, if you had some technical trouble, a full version will be recorded and available to you later. Yeah, so please take a moment to register for next week if you're interested. And thank you again for joining us. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.